the question at hand on the rationale for a multi-stakeholder approach in the implementation of the ACHPR. And allow me to draw a few points as I start by making a case on why we think it is really critical that as we look at the ACHPR process in its entirety, that we need to focus quite critically on the studies that we've done, which Dr. Brenda was one of our consultants for some pieces of those work, of some of that work. We would see that there is an interplay between the key actors that we would normally talk about in terms of human rights. And of course, coming from a bias of business and human rights, through that lens, we will definitely. And right at the center of that conversation, we believe that human rights actors would be placed there. And of course, coming from NANRI, there is where we'll be critically looking at national human rights institutions, or actually the treaty body mechanisms in charge of human rights. But then alongside on the peripheries of that, we also look at stakeholders such as the public. And here is because the public would be the main consumers of the goods and services. And we thought that before we look at the gap, we would also look at the role of science, considering that in the front of business and human rights, there's a lot of, evolution when it comes to the digital space, and actually even how trade is going to be conducted, not just now, but in the near future. And so some of the key areas that we are looking at to make a case for the rationale for a multi-stakeholder collaboration or an approach is, I will take it in 3 dimensions. So one would be to make a case for a participatory approach, and then look at an integrated approach, and then a human rights-based approach, because we believe that these 3 approaches would have to continuously work together to ensure that the ACHPR process is not only effective and efficient, but is also very inclusive. So why do we say this? As has been mentioned in the introduction of this panel, there are several benefits that the ACHPR comes with, but also, as Brenda has mentioned, it is very, very easy, and we actually realize that there's a lot of human rights issues that could be actual now in the process, and some are potentially going to happen in the process should particular attention not be paid to them. And so we believe that through a participatory approach, where all stakeholders are able to have open consultations and dialogue in a space that is considered free and equitable, that we are able to ensure that all the considerations and the human rights needs are being taken into account, not only to foster interrelationships, but also then to ensure that we are not only addressing the needs of the present generation, but we are not compromising the needs of the future generation to be able to also meet their own needs. We also think that it is critical to look at the multi-stakeholder collaboration through an integrated approach, where we then now are ensuring that we are working towards the same thing. We are speaking the same language. We are ensuring coherence, not only between the ACHPR national strategies, but also looking at the other existing policies and strategies that already exist, and seeing the areas of synergies and how the ACHPR strategies, for example, can leverage on these existing strategies. This would ensure not only coherence, but also the effectiveness when it comes to implementation of these strategies and the policies. And then finally, in that approach, we're also looking at a human rights-based approach. And for sure, we know that if we implement these proactive measures and we ensure that we are, integrating, all speaking towards the same thing, we have to ensure that no one is left behind. And so we believe that then the human rights basis for this conversation and processes becomes very critical, because then we are reaching the most vulnerable groups, at-risk communities, and ensuring that their voices are heard, and that what they also are seeking in terms of their needs being met through the ACHPR process come to fruition. So I will quickly, as I almost draw to a close, highlight a few things that we think some partners within this group we call the multi-stakeholder group could do in this process. And I will start from the government, because I mentioned the government, the human rights actors, the businesses, and then on the peripheries, we're talking about the public as well as the role that science can do. And we believe that in this conversation and in these processes, the government can do a few things. Some that I would mention would be, one, to just ensure that they set a conducive environment. And this would be through collective and coordinated actions for the successful implementation of the ACHPR. So for sure, we are talking about, policies and the legislative environment, speaking to the effectiveness in a coordinated manner through which the ACHPR is implemented. But also then we are saying that beyond that, then the complementarity needs to come quite strongly from the government side, where the interventions are not coming in terms of, competing with whatever already exists, but that any effort and any strategy that is put in place is building onto what could already be happening. And so the complementarity also allows, the different actors to leverage on the strengths of each other. And then, of course, I think, as has been mentioned by Brenda, the issues of non-tariff barriers and just the human rights concerns there, and believing that the government still has a role to play by ensuring that they create an environment that also supports the small farmers and small producers in business and human rights, especially in the National Action Plan processes. One of the issues that keeps coming up is how much the NAPs and all the processes that we are embarking in also meet the needs of the small enterprises. And so we believe that the government is able to, to address the needs of these small enterprises so that they feel meaningfully involved and engaged in this process. And of course, when it comes to policy coherence, as I have already talked about, just ensuring that the regulation and the overall coordination of all actors, speaks to the spirit of the AFCFTA, but also on the other processes.
May I ask you to conclude, please?
Thanks, Honorable Deso. So finally, let me speak about the human rights actors and the others and a few things that they could do. So the national human rights institutions have a role to play, as Brenda has mentioned, based on the role and the mandate of the NHRIs. And I'll just cite a few: monitoring and investigation, reporting on human rights abuses and issues that emanate from the AFCFTA process, but also then supporting the issues of research, as well as providing advisory to the states. And I'll leave as I finish to talk about the role of science, because when the human rights actors are raising awareness and highlighting human rights issues, we also need to bring in academia and bring in ensuring that the knowledge on emerging and evolving the dynamic space in trade issues and business and human rights are brought to light. And we believe that when this happens, then we are creating an expanding market and not only looking at financial sustainability and spurring innovation, but we are also creating a culture to respect human rights. Thank you very much.